The Phillips curve. In Chapter 16, we derived what we defined as the aggregate supply function, which was reverse L-shaped. The horizontal segment was explained by the price markup rule and the assumption of a constant unit cost over a range of outputs. In other words, firms in aggregate are assumed to supply as much real output or goods and services as is demanded at the current price level, up to a limit defined by the available capacity. The aggregate supply function becomes vertical at full employment because beyond that point the economy exhausts its capacity to expand short-run output due to shortages of labor and capital equipment. Firms will then be trying to outbid each other for the already fully employed labor resources, and in doing so will drive money wages up. Under normal circumstances, the economy will rarely approach the output level, or Y in this case, which means that the economy usually faces constant costs. We acknowledged in Chapter 16, however, that rising costs might be encountered at a lower level of aggregate output, given that all firms or sectors are unlikely to hit full capacity simultaneously, so that cost pressures would begin to mount before the overall full capacity output was reached. Thus, the reverse L-shaped aggregate supply curve represents an analytical simplification. It was considered plausible that inflationary pressure rise in inverse proportion to the unemployment rate, which was taken to be a proxy for overall health of the economy. While earlier researchers had studied this relationship, it was not until 1958 that New Zealand economist Bill Phillips published a statistical study that showed the relationship between the unemployment rate and the rate of change of growth rate of money wages for the UK in the period of 1861 to 1957. Phillips believed that since money wage cost represent a high proportion of total cost movements, and money wage rates would drive movements in the general price level. Later economists constructed the relationship as being between the rate of price inflation and the unemployment rate. In the Phillips curve framework, the level of economic activity is represented by the unemployment rate, so the model linked the level of economic activity to changes in the price level. Therefore, when the unemployment rate rises above some irreducible minimum, economic activity declines and wage pressures decline. Conversely, as the unemployment rate moves towards that irreducible minimum, the economy moves closer to full capacity utilization, and full employment and wage pressures escalate. Move this a little closer. Okay, so Phillips explained this empirical relationship by reference to the supply demands or demand for labor. When the demand for labor is high and there are very few unemployed, we should expect employers to bid wage rates up quite rapidly. On the other hand, it appears that workers are reluctant to offer their services at less than prevailing rates when the demand for labor is low and unemployment is high, so that wage rates fall only very slowly. The relation between unemployment and the rate of change rates is therefore likely to be highly nonlinear. He also recognized that in wage bargaining, the direction of change in the economy was a factor that had to be considered quite apart from the level of economic activity. Thus, at a particular rate of unemployment, employers would bid more vigorously for the services of labor when demand was increasing than when it was falling. Assumes that at very high levels of unemployment, the growth in the money wage is negative. In nominal economic conditions, there tends to be downward money wage rigidity and so the Phillips curve would always be associated with positive or close to zero money wage growth. However, during the GFC, Great Financial Crisis, a number of Eurozone economies experienced falling money wages. Soon after Phillips released his work, American economists Paul Samuelson and Robert Solow defined the Phillips curve as a policy tool which the government could use to lessen the burden of unemployment. Reference was made to menu of choices, which implied that policymakers could choose a combination of inflation and unemployment which corresponded to a preferred point on their estimate Phillips curve. This introduces the idea of policy trade-off between unemployment and inflation. If the government wanted to sustain a lower unemployment rate, then the cost of that policy decision would be at higher inflation. What would be the best policy choice for government? This was a political position, and the government tried to assess what might be the socially acceptable combination of the twin evils, depending on the ideology preferences of the voters. Some nations might choose point B, where the inflation rate is low but unemployment high, while the other nations would prefer point A with higher inflation and lower unemployment. The slope of the Phillips curve at each point indicates the trade-off possibilities. There would be a political problem for a government if its preferred trade-off of inflation and unemployment was unattainable because it lay within the unshaded area beneath the curve rather than on the Phillips curve itself.